Hey friends, Joe here with Geeks Worldwide. This is the Akitio Node Titan. It's the newest iteration of Akitio's external GPU enclosure. And next to it is the Core X from Razer, which I just posted a review and some testing on the other day. So I want to do a side-by-side of these two and also give the Akitio its due treatment. They're very similar devices, right? They're both trying to accomplish the same thing. So if your need is that you have a laptop, an Ultrabook that doesn't have a dedicated GPU, and you don't want to spend more money on a desktop. You want to have just one machine. You don't have to worry about syncing up your files on OneDrive or Dropbox, whatever you use. You just want one machine, everything there. These two suckers are awesome options. And they're similar in what they try to accomplish, but they're different in design. And I think that's really the key differentiator between the two, is when you're trying to determine which one you're going to go with. It's really which one fits with your aesthetic choices better and within your budget. This one is a little more expensive at around $350 or less. I've seen it as low as $335 recently, and the Core X is $300. And yeah, definitely different in how they go about things. So the Akitio, if you want to know more about the Core X, watch the last video. With the Akitio Node Titan, this has a 650 watt power supply unit. And just like the Razer Blade Core, sorry, not the Blade, just like the Razer Core, installation is pretty easy. Now with the Core, there's a simple handlebar where you just go like this, pull it out, and you have access to your GPU. With this, you take the top off, and then you pop your GPU in here, and just like the Core, you have your power buttons, your power plug on the left. One of the key differentiators is cooling. So with the Core, the fan is going to be on the side, whereas on the Node, it's on the bottom. And we should actually, because of that, see better performance on the Node, but that remains to be seen because I haven't even plugged a GPU into this thing yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get it all hooked up and do some testing on it. The folks over at Otherworld Computers, they hooked me up with a Radeon, what is it? Yeah, it's an RX 580 GPU, whereas the Core has a GTX 1080. So two different GPUs, but we're going to see how cooling compares between the two and just overall performance. So let's get to it. All right, folks, this is going to be our test setup. We have the Razer Blade Stealth with a quad-core i7 and 16 gigs of RAM, connected over HDMI to the, USB-C, to the Akitio Node Titan with an RX 580. That's connected to this Acer IPS 144Hz display monitor through HDMI. I've got a few games to test, including The Witcher 3, which is what you see running here. And I'll be testing Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, as well as Doom Eternal. Gotta test Doom Eternal. So from my initial testing, what I'm seeing is pretty good. I play some Witcher 3, which is loading right now, at around 55 to 60 frames per second, with everything set to high at 1080p. And it ran really well, very smooth, very consistent. I would say a little more consistent than what I got out of the Razer Core X with a GTX 1080. So that's something to keep in mind. But I'll do some more testing and share with you how it goes. The installation process for the Akitio Node is incredibly easy. I was actually blown away by this. So this is actually a handlebar. If you press it, it's a little loud, but this will allow you to transport the Akitio Node Titan. When I did the Core X review, one of the things that I didn't mention, but it kind of bugged me a little bit, is that there wasn't a handlebar. And so I just said, hey, look, if you expect to go to a LAN party with this thing, don't buy it for that purpose. But now with the Akitio, you can. Now, there's no GPU in this right now, but I'd say it weighs about 11 to 12 pounds, and whereas the Core X weighs 14 to 15 pounds. All right, so to open it up, there's two dials here, and you just take it off. Something I will say is that the metal on metal is more, that nasty sound's more of a problem here on the Akitio than it is on the X. But anyway, so then you take your GPU, you have one PCI Express slot so you can't mess it up. And I think it'd be helpful if I removed this and this. So that's great, you don't need a screwdriver. You can completely do this with your fingers. All right. Of course, we gotta remove these. Okay, very nice. Very easy just to get that in. Get that seated. Okay, good. All right, so now for power. That's awesome. Okay. Elegant solution. Okay, so it's going to need 8 power pins. Done and done. Now for the extra cables, you just tuck them right back in. One thing I like about the power supply being on the bottom, or rather the cooling fan being on the bottom of this, is that it's not going to interfere with any of the cables. When I first installed the GPU provided by Razer into the Core X, immediately the cables were rubbing against the fan, and so I had to sort of pull them out, stretch them, give them some flex, and then eventually they stopped, but they very well could go right back. Okay. Putting the top back on. Metal on metal. Push them in, twist, and done. And here's a tour if you're interested. So on the left side, you have a nice honeycomb grill so you can see right through. I don't believe there's any RGB lighting. You can also remove these screws and get direct access. So I suppose if there is some kind of problem with the cables running against the fans in the GPU, you can just manipulate them there. Okay. On the other side, you have the Node Titan logo. Very clean design. I love this metal, not the sound that it makes when it rubs against other metal, and the fact that it'll probably get scratched up a bit, but I love the color and the metal, how it all looks together. Now on the back, okay, so for I/O, it's entirely dependent on what your GPU has. And then other than that, there's a USB-C port. This is going to send power. It says 85 watts here, so that's awesome. To your laptop, that will charge your laptop. You don't need to then plug in your AC adapter to your laptop. Now from a side-by-side perspective, this is the Razer Core X, and next to it the Akitio Node. So they're very similar. On the right side of each device, you have the logos, right? So this is the Razer logo, this is the Node Titan logo. And even though there's a honeycomb grill here and you can see the GPU, you won't be able to see the lighting from the chroma that Razer has. In both cases, if you want to get to the other side, flipping it around, this is where you'll see the chroma for Razer. And then on the other side, it's just so much lighter. On the other side here is where you see access to your GPU. And I didn't see any type of lighting in here when I plugged it in, or when I opened it up, so we'll have to plug it in to see if that's the case. Now just flipping it around to the back. Okay, so on the Akitio Node, there's nothing additional. All you have is a USB-C that goes to your laptop, and then of course whatever your GPU provides, which is going to be limited to graphical I/O. Sorry for the noise there. Okay, and then on the Razer Core, in addition to the GPU I/O, you have Ethernet, 4 USB-A ports, and the USB-C port. The USB-C on the Akitio is 85 watts. I believe it's 60 watts on the Razer Core. It's really designed for the Razer Blade Stealth mostly, so Razer's just sort of matching it up with their machine. Whereas with the Akitio, this is going to be used for, it can be used for anything. I mean, this can be used for anything as well, the Razer can, but with the Akitio, it's not really platform specific, even though they do advertise a lot with the Apple devices. pretty interesting situation over here. So it does turn out that the Radeon card is defective. So I swapped in with a GTX 1080, the same exact card that I had in my Core X for testing. And what it came down to is the Node is better at producing consistent frame rates than the Core X in my testing, which was Resident Evil 7, Witcher 3, Doom Eternal, and Apex Legends. So that's obviously a very important thing and super cool. But that's pretty much the only thing that I think is in favor of the Akitio Node. And there's a lot to consider. Here are all the reasons why I would go with the Razer Core X. It's $30 less at $300 even. That's meaningful. Also, it has additional ports, USB-A's, Ethernet, those are awesome. It does have Chroma if you're into that. But also, I think it's better built. So the Akitio Node, it's very metally. Of course, the Core X is completely made out of aluminum, but it's thicker, and as a result, it's a little more dull when you touch it, tap it, move it around. Now, it is heavier, so the Akitio Node is lighter. It has this handlebar. Gotta love the metal. So you can pick it up and move it around. That's a piece of cake. Now, both are easy to open up and to make adjustments, although I do give a little bit more usability credit to the Core X, because you pull it out and then you have access to everything without any barriers throughout most of it. Whereas with the Akitio, you put your hand into the unit to then manipulate it, grab the GTX or the RTX card, whatever it is, and do your manipulation. So I still have to recommend the Core X, even though the Akitio does have better frame rate stabilization. That's a really important thing. So do your research, think about what's most important to you. I'd say if you want a complete Razer system, obviously the Core. If you want something that is easy to port around, because you do plan on doing some type of going to LAN parties, or you just like to carry things around on a bus, then the Akitio makes sense. I would bring it down to that. But of course, the frame rate stabilization is huge, and I attribute that in large part to having the fan on the bottom. I think that was a really good move. One other thing I do want to mention, so my setup is in my bedroom, and when this sucker is idle, so your laptop is in sleep mode, for example, it's loud. It's louder than the Core X, I'd say by at least double. So that's something else to keep in mind too. But in both cases, I turned them both completely off at night because they both drove me nuts. So, hey, if it's gonna be one or the other, they're both loud enough, I guess. But this is much louder in standby than the Core X. All right, hopefully you found this helpful. If you have questions, please leave them in the comments, and I'll do my best to get to them. Thanks a lot.